This is Taking Stock. I'm Bruce Whitfield. We're at the biggest chicken production facility in Africa. It belongs to Astral Foods, a listed company on the JSE. And these day-old chicks are about to get transported out to various broiler facilities located around Gauteng. One of the broiler facilities that has run itself into a lot of trouble is at a place called Standerton in the Lekwa municipality. Astral Foods has got a court order against that municipality instructing it to deliver basic services. That municipality is either ignoring or refusing to comply with the court order. Chris Gitter, Chief Executive of Astral Foods. What do you do next? You sue the president. Why go from a municipal issue to the presidency?
Well, that's the question. Who's ultimately responsible for this? You know, we're a good citizen. We comply to every rule and regulation in this country. We pay our taxes and we pay our rates, yet there's no service. So sometimes I can clearly understand the frustration with a lot of people in this country who revert to the streets to try and just show that there's a problem here. In Standerton or Lekwa, we specifically went to that area, develop it, because there's a huge water. It's the richest water source infrastructure, the Vaal River system in the country. We wanted to be close to that. It's also in the center of where the best maize is produced and the highest yielding soya crop. So that's the place to farm chicken. We were guaranteed electricity when we developed. We were guaranteed water. It was all part of the deal. That's why we took money there. Now, a couple of years later, we struggle with load shedding. The electrical infrastructure is in a very bad state. We had it audited by external specialists and experts. Now the water issue, after the last electricity shedding, the water system has fell apart. So it's the infrastructure. So you're on the Vaal River, on the Vaal Dam, on the Grootdraai Dam, next to the Concord Dam. The water is there. You just can't deliver it. So there's a problem in between. So who's responsible for that?
But you've got court orders. You've got a court order that says to the Lekwa municipality, you must do as you are contracted to do. And they haven't done it.
They can't do it because the infrastructure is falling apart.
But you've invested in that infrastructure. You've poured money into that.
We've invested, and that's the frustration. Most of the pumps, they are our property. We maintain them, we keep them up.
But the municipality doesn't see it like that. That you put the pumps in, but from a governance point of view, the municipality sees it as their role to continue delivering services, even though you've paid for the equipment.
But they don't. So that factory is now getting about a third of the water that it used to get a couple of months ago. And a third of the birds can now be processed. The rest of the birds are under threat now. We drive them around the country at a huge cost, down to Cape Town to process birds, which is an emergency effect. And we're going to have to, again, trigger a legal action against the provincial government and against the presidency and say, but who's ultimately responsible here? Somebody must be responsible. In my company, the buck stops right here. Where does the buck stop on that side? The ball keeps on getting passed from one to the other. There's meetings, there's discussions, and there's absolutely no outcome.
And deeply frustrating, clearly, and a reliance on a legal system that municipalities can ignore. How then do you actually get satisfaction? Is the president the only, is that the last resort? And if that doesn't work, what do you do next?
Well, Bruce, then you have to go off-grid at a huge cost. We're already struggling from a cost pressure point of view to compete against the rest of the world.
So what happens, for example, in the space where there are 5 million eggs that are being hatched on a regular basis, producing little day-old chicks like this, when you have stage 4 load shedding, as we did in January, that just must wreak havoc.
You now run diesel generators at 5 times the cost. So there goes your global competitiveness, cost competitiveness. You must also now build your own water infrastructure, and then you must put high-cost security in place to secure your own infrastructure.
I was talking to Jacques Marie the other day, one of the presidential envoys looking to raise $100 billion worth of foreign direct investment in South Africa, and he was saying everything was going fine until stage 4 load shedding. Suddenly, everyone's put on the brakes in terms of making investment promises to the country. If we don't sort this out, and you can't produce chicken at a competitive price, we get more foreign chicken imports. This industry, which is one of the biggest in the agri-processing sector, has to start shedding jobs.
Bruce, how do you go abroad and go and beg for investments if you know that your rural infrastructure is falling apart? Fix this first. The newly elected government...
Is Standerton isolated, or do you find that happening in other municipalities?
No, Standerton is one of many. One of many. If you look at the old Brits, Muddybank, you look at Grahamstown, there's a number of towns, Delmas, if you go outside a 30-40 kilometer radius of the big metros, the countryside is actually falling apart. And that is where you want to create jobs. Now you've got more people streaming to the cities because the infrastructure and the jobs are falling. We're going to get forced out of Standerton, and the community will suffer there.
What do you need to go from producing 5 million of these little guys a week to 6 million a week to 7 to 8 million a week? What do you need as the chief executive of the biggest poultry producer on this continent to make that happen?
I need two things. I need our government to look at the dumping and the imports and say South Africa first. And the second, Mr. President, give me infrastructure. I will invest, reinvest, and create jobs exactly what you promised this country during your election campaign.
So you're willing to work together?
Absolutely, I'll do that. Give me the means and I'll do it. I'll invest the money. We will produce food and we will continue to produce jobs.
But if somebody went and looked on the front seat of your car, they would find piles of legal documents this deep. Because you seem to spend more of your time in courts fighting to get the basic services done than actually at your office producing chickens.
Isn't that sad in a country like South Africa? 25 years ago, we were all gung-ho. We had the Ramaphoria. We were all gung-ho. We're going to fix this country. And here we sit today, and I don't have water 50 kilometers away from here to run a very basic business. Now I have to do it at a cost and to the detriment of all consumers in this country.
And ultimately to jobs as well. Chris Skitter, the chief executive of Astral Foods. He is fighting fights on many fronts, but it is not a deeply complicated process to start repairing the country's infrastructure to ensure that we keep the jobs in the country, to keep the food production in the country, to make sure that we don't become net importers of food, because at that point you start losing your ability to bargain and negotiate when it comes to price. And the one thing that we do not need in South Africa is a food inflation spike. That's it from Taking Stock for this evening. Thank you very much for watching us. Oh, that was close. You can get us on Twitter as well. Good night.